The mall was alive with the chaos of a Saturday afternoon in late autumn. The kind of day where the air outside had turned crisp and cold, driving families indoors to wander between storefronts adorned with early holiday decorations. Children pressed their faces against toy store windows, their breath fogging the glass. Teenagers clustered near the food court, laughing too loud, their voices echoing off the high ceilings. Somewhere in the distance, a child's excited scream pierced through the ambient noise, followed by a mother's tired but patient correction. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The scent of cinnamon rolls and roasted coffee beans drifted through the corridors, mixing with the artificial floral perfume pumped through the ventilation system. Holiday music played softly from hidden speakers, a gentle, relentless reminder that the season of giving and joy was approaching. But in the back corner of the mall's lower level, tucked away in a small clothing boutique called Threads and Things, far from the glittering chaos and manufactured cheer, something else entirely was unfolding. A young woman stood behind the register, her hands moving mechanically as she folded a cream-colored sweater. Her movements were practiced, automatic, the result of 8 months of repetitive motion. Her name tag, slightly crooked and worn at the edges, read Sarah in faded black letters. She was 23, maybe 24 at most, with dark circles under her hazel eyes that no amount of concealer could quite hide. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, professional but unremarkable. She wore the store's required uniform, a simple black blouse and dark jeans. But somehow, she seemed to disappear into the background, as if she'd learned long ago how to make herself invisible. Her fingers trembled slightly as she worked, a subtle shake that most customers wouldn't notice. But if you watched her long enough, you'd see other things too. The way her eyes darted toward the entrance every 30 seconds like clockwork. The way her shoulders tensed whenever the door chimed. The way she positioned herself behind the counter with her back to the wall, never fully exposed, always with an exit strategy in sight. She was waiting for something or someone. Then the door chimed again. A man walked in, and everything about him was wrong for this place. Tall, easily 6'3" and broad-shouldered, wearing a black leather vest over a faded gray Henley that had seen better days. His jeans were worn at the knees, his boots heavy and scuffed, the kind that had walked thousands of miles of highway. The patch on his back was unmistakable, a snarling wolf's head surrounded by flames, with the words Iron Wolves MC curved above it and Sacramento below. His presence filled the small store like a shadow, stretching across sunlight. Women shopping near the clearance rack glanced up nervously, then quickly looked away. A teenage girl clutched her shopping bag a little tighter. His name was Marcus 50 Dalton, though most people just called him 50. The nickname came from a bet he'd made 15 years ago that he could ride 50,000 miles on the same Harley without a single breakdown. He'd won that bet, and the name stuck. Now, at 47 years old, with silver threading through his dark beard and scars hidden beneath his ink, he'd ridden closer to 200,000 miles. But 50 sounded better than 200, so 50 it remained. He wasn't there to shop. He didn't belong in places like this, with their soft music and pastel colors and the faint scent of vanilla candles. His world was made of asphalt and engine grease, of open highways and dive bars where everyone knew your name and nobody asked about your past. But his girlfriend's birthday was coming up in 3 days, and his brothers at the clubhouse had demanded, really, that he get her something nice for once instead of another goddamn bike part. So here he was, standing in the middle of a women's clothing boutique, feeling completely and utterly out of place. But what happened in the next 10 minutes would change everything. Not just for him, and not just for Sarah. Before we go any further, before I tell you what happened when their worlds collided in that small store, I need you to do something. If you believe that courage can come from the most unexpected places, that strength isn't always loud and aggressive, but sometimes quiet and deliberate, and that the people the world fears most are often the ones who protect it when no one else will pause right now. Hit that like button, drop a comment, Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories like this one. Tell us in the comments below where you're watching from tonight. What city, what country, what corner of this world, because this story might just restore your faith in humanity, and God knows we all need a little more of that these days. Now, let's talk about Sarah Mitchell. Sarah Mitchell had been working at Threads and Things for nearly 8 months. It wasn't glamorous work. Minimum wage, $15.50 an hour, which sounded better than it was once you subtracted taxes and tried to make it stretch to cover rent, utilities, groceries, and everything else life demanded. The hours were irregular. The managers barely noticed her existence beyond making sure she showed up on time, and the employee discount wasn't enough to make buying anything from the store actually affordable. But it paid the bills. Barely. And right now, barely was enough. Life had been hard since their mother passed 2 years ago. Cancer. The fast kind that didn't give you time to prepare, that swept in like a storm and left nothing but wreckage behind. Sarah had been 21, fresh out of community college with an associate's degree in business administration that had taken her 4 years instead of 2, because she'd been working full-time to help with the bills even then. Their father had left long before that, disappearing into the kind of silence that never gets explained. One day he was there distant, distracted, always looking at the door like he was planning his escape, and the next day he wasn't. No note, no phone call, just gone. Sarah had been 12. Her sister Mia had been 7. They'd learned early that you couldn't count on everyone who was supposed to love you. When their mother died, Sarah became the parent overnight. She became the provider, the protector, the one who signed the school forms and made sure there was food in the fridge, and tried desperately to keep Mia's life as normal as possible. She worked doubles when she could, picking up shifts at a diner on weekends, skipping meals so Mia could eat, wearing the same 3 outfits over and over because new clothes were a luxury they couldn't afford. She carried the weight of adulthood on shoulders far too young to bear it, and nobody noticed because she'd gotten very good at pretending everything was fine. Mia was 17 now, a senior in high school with good grades and dreams of going to college. Dreams Sarah was determined to make happen even if it meant sacrificing everything else. They shared a cramped studio apartment on the rough side of town, the kind of building where the landlord ignored maintenance requests and the neighbors screamed at each other through thin walls at 3 in the morning. But it was theirs. It was shelter. It was home. For a while, things had been okay. Not good, but manageable. Sarah had her routine. Work, home, take care of Mia, sleep, repeat. She kept her head down, didn't make waves, survived one day at a time. But 6 months ago, everything changed. His name was Derek Holloway. Derek was a shift manager at Tech Zone, the electronics store on the mall's 2nd floor. He was 31, tall, athletic in that carefully maintained gym bro way, with styled blonde hair and a smile that he wielded like a weapon. He was the kind of guy who wore expensive cologne and drove a leased BMW and always seemed to be selling something, even in casual conversation. Sarah first met him in the employee parking garage 4 floors underground, a concrete tomb where the fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered, and the air smelled like exhaust and stale cigarettes. She'd been walking to her car after a closing shift when he'd approached her, seemingly out of nowhere. "Hey, you work at that clothing place, right? Threads and Things?" She'd nodded politely, keys already in hand, her body language screaming, "I'm not interested in conversation. I'm Derek. I've seen you around." That smile. "You want to grab coffee sometime?" "Oh, that's really nice, but I'm pretty busy with work and taking care of my sister, so come on, just coffee. 1 hour. I promise I'm not a serial killer." He'd laughed at his own joke. "I really can't, but thank you." She tried to keep her voice light, friendly but firm. His smile had faltered for just a moment. "Your loss." She'd gotten in her car and driven away, thinking that was the end of it. It wasn't. At first, it was just texts. Her phone number wasn't private. She'd had to put it on job applications, emergency contact forms, all the usual places. He'd gotten it somehow. "Hey, it's Derek from the mall. Still thinking about that coffee?" She didn't respond. You looked really pretty today. That blue shirt is a good color on you. She blocked the number. 2 days later, a different number. Why are you ignoring me? I'm just trying to be nice. Then he started showing up during her shifts. He'd wander into the boutique, pretending to browse the men's section, which was tiny and clearly not his style, while watching her. He'd pick up a shirt, hold it up, ask her opinion in a voice loud enough that other customers could hear, playing the part of the friendly, harmless guy. But his eyes told a different story. Then came the gifts she never asked for. Flowers left on her car windshield with notes attached. For Sarah, hope these brighten your day. A box of chocolates delivered to the store with her name on it. A teddy bear holding a heart that said, "Be mine," left at the counter when she wasn't looking. Each gift made her skin crawl. She told her manager, a middle-aged woman named Brenda who seemed perpetually exhausted by life. "There's a guy from another store who keeps watching me." Brenda had sighed like Sarah was adding to an already long list of problems. "Has he threatened you?" "Not exactly, but has he touched you inappropriately?" "No, but he makes me uncomfortable and—" "Look, Sarah, I get it. But unless he's actually done something, there's not much I can do. If it gets worse, file a complaint with mall security." She had. She'd gone to the security office during her lunch break and explained the situation to a board guard who typed slowly with 2 fingers on an ancient keyboard. "So he hasn't threatened you, hasn't assaulted you, just asks you out and gives you gifts?" "It's more than that. He follows me. He shows up everywhere I am." "Has he followed you home?" I don't know. I don't think so." The guard had closed his little notebook. "Ma'am, I'll make a note in the system, but unless he does something illegal, there's not much we can do. You could try getting a restraining order." She'd looked into it. Restraining orders required proof of credible threats or violence. Derek was too smart for that. He kept everything just barely on the legal side of the line, hovering in that gray area, where he could call it interest or persistence or just being friendly. But Sarah knew what it really was. Predation, ownership, control. The notes under her. "Apartment door started 3 months ago. You'd be so much happier with me. Stop fighting it. I saw you at the grocery store today. You should let me take you sometime. I'd treat you right. Why won't you give me a chance? I've been so patient." That last one had made her physically ill. She'd changed her route home, started parking in different spots, varied her schedule as much as possible. But he always seemed to know where she was. One evening, she'd looked out her apartment window and seen a car that looked like his BMW parked across the street, idling in the darkness. She'd called the police. They'd come, taken her statement, driven by the location. The car was gone by the time they arrived. "Without proof, ma'am, there's not much we can do," the officer had told her, his voice kind but helpless. "Document everything. Save the notes, the texts. If you see him outside your home again, call us immediately." But what good would that do? By the time they arrived, he'd be gone. Just like always. Sarah stopped sleeping well. She'd lie awake in the dark, listening to every sound, convinced she heard footsteps in the hallway outside her door. She bought pepper spray and kept it in her purse. She made Mia promise to text her whenever she arrived anywhere and left anywhere. She stopped going out except for work and essentials. Her world got smaller and smaller, and Derek's smile got wider and wider. That Saturday afternoon, the day everything changed, Sarah had seen him earlier. She'd been walking into the mall for her shift, her head down, earbuds in, even though no music was playing. Just a deterrent, a barrier. And there he was, standing near the main entrance, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the crowd like a predator watching the herd. Their eyes had met for just a moment. He'd smiled. She'd felt ice flood her veins. She'd slipped through a side entrance, texted her sister, "Stay at Jessica's tonight. Don't come home. I'll explain later." Mia had responded immediately. "Is He bothering you again?" "Sarah, I'm scared." "I know, baby. I'm handling it. Just stay away from the apartment tonight, please." Now, 6 hours into her shift, Sarah was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical labor. It was the exhaustion of constant vigilance, of fear that never quite left, of trying to appear normal when everything inside her was screaming. Every customer who walked through the door made her flinch. Every shadow near the entrance made her breath catch. She'd folded the same sweater 3 times. And then Marcus 50 Dalton walked in, and somehow, without knowing why, Sarah felt the first tiny spark of something she hadn't felt in months: hope. Marcus hadn't wanted to come to the mall. In fact, he'd actively avoided malls for most of his adult life. Too crowded, too loud, too many people pretending to be happy while drowning in debt. The whole place felt artificial, like a stage set designed to make you spend money you didn't have on things you didn't need. But Jackie, his girlfriend of 2 years, had her birthday coming up, and his brothers at the Iron Wolves clubhouse had been relentless. 50, you can't give her another bike part, Hank had said, shaking his head in disbelief. Why not? She liked the custom grips I got her last year. Because she's a woman, not a Harley. Get her jewelry or clothes or some shit that normal people give. Jackie's not normal people. She rides better than half you idiots. Exactly. Which is why she deserves something that shows you actually thought about it instead of just grabbing something from the shop. Marcus had grumbled, complained, and generally made his displeasure known. But deep down, he knew they were right. Jackie was special. She'd stuck by him through the rough patches, understood his need for the road, never tried to change him. She deserved something thoughtful. So here he was, standing in the middle of threads and things, a boutique that smelled like lavender and sold scarves that cost more than his motorcycle payment, feeling completely out of his element. Marcus, 50 Dalton, hadn't always been a biker. There was a before, though he tried not to think about it much. Before the leather vest and the road and the brotherhood that had saved his life in more ways than one. He'd grown up in Sacramento, the son of a mechanic who drank too much and a mother who'd left when Marcus was 8. He'd raised himself, essentially, learning to cook eggs at 9, to forge his father's signature on permission slips at 10, to lie to teachers about bruises at 11. He joined the army at 18, desperate to escape, and spent 6 years in places that taught him what real fear looked like. He'd come home at 24 with a chest full of medals he kept in a shoebox and nightmares that woke him up screaming for years afterward. The Iron Wolves had found him when he was 26, working as a mechanic at a shop in South Sacramento, barely holding it together. He'd been drinking too much, sleeping too little, existing more than living. One of the club members had brought a bike in for repair, and they'd gotten to talking. One conversation became two. Two became an invitation to the clubhouse. An invitation became a brotherhood. They'd given him purpose, family, a code to live by. The Iron Wolves weren't outlaws, not in the traditional sense. They didn't run drugs or guns or any of the stuff that gave motorcycle clubs a bad name. They were what they called a riding club, men and women who loved the road, who took care of each other, who showed up when times got hard. They organized charity rides for veterans. They escorted abuse victims to court hearings when they were too scared to go alone. They showed up at funerals for members' family when nobody else did. They lived by a simple code: loyalty, honor. Protect those who can't protect themselves. Marcus had been vice president of the club for 5 years now. At 47, he was one of the older members, and younger guys looked up to him. He took that responsibility seriously. He'd seen a lot in 2 decades with the Wolves. He'd buried brothers. He'd held friends while they cried over losses that couldn't be fixed. He'd stood between women and their abusers, between kids and violence, between the vulnerable and the vultures. He'd learned to read people fast. You had to, on the road, you had to know who was dangerous and who was scared, who was lying and who was broken. And the moment he walked into that boutique and saw Sarah behind the counter, he knew immediately that girl was terrified. Sarah approached cautiously when she saw him browsing awkwardly near a rack of scarves. Part of her job was customer service, greeting people within 30 seconds of entry, asking if they needed help finding anything. Usually, she enjoyed that part: the small interactions, the brief connections, the satisfaction of helping someone find the perfect gift. But approaching a 6'3" biker covered in ink and leather, that sent her anxiety into overdrive for entirely different reasons than Derek did. Still, a job was a job. "Hi there," she said softly, her customer service voice activated. "Can I help you find something?" Her voice was practiced, professional. But Marcus noticed immediately that it was also strained. He noticed the tremor beneath the polite words. He noticed the way her eyes darted toward the entrance, even as she spoke to him. The way her hands were clenched just slightly too tight at her sides. The way she positioned herself with the counter between them, keeping distance. He'd spent 20 years reading people on the road. You learned fast who was dangerous and who was scared, who was predator and who was prey. This girl was absolutely terrified, and it wasn't because of him. "Yeah," he said, keeping his voice low and even, non-threatening. "Looking for a gift. My girlfriend's birthday is coming up." Sarah nodded, a small flicker of relief crossing her face. A girlfriend. That meant he wasn't here to hit on her. That meant this might be a normal, easy interaction. "Okay, great," she said, leading him toward a display of jewelry and accessories near the back of the store. "What kind of things does she usually like? Is she more classic, modern, bohemian?" Marcus looked at the display like she'd asked him to explain quantum physics. She likes to ride motorcycles and wear black." Despite everything, Sarah almost smiled. "Okay. So edgy. Modern. Got it." She pulled out a few options: a silver bracelet with small spike details, a scarf with a skull pattern that somehow looked elegant rather than morbid, some leather-banded rings. As she showed him the options, Marcus watched her more than the merchandise. She kept glancing over her shoulder. Her breathing was shallow, controlled. Every time the door chimed, she tensed. Finally, he spoke quietly. "You all right?" Sarah froze, mid-sentence, a ring still in her hand. For a moment, she didn't answer. She debated lying, saying, "I'm fine," the way she'd been trained to do since childhood. The way women are taught to minimize, to avoid making a scene, to not burden others with their problems. But something about this man, this rough, tattooed biker who looked like he could break someone in half, but was carefully picking out birthday gifts, made her feel like maybe, just maybe, honesty was possible. "There's a man," she whispered, so quietly he had to lean in to hear. "He won't leave me alone." Marcus's expression didn't change. His face remained calm, almost neutral. But something shifted behind his eyes. Something cold and deliberate. "Where is he?" "I don't know. I saw him earlier today, near the entrance." "He?" Her voice cracked. "He follows me. Everywhere. Work, home, the grocery store. I've tried going to security, to the police, but they say unless he does something, they can't help. And I can't. I can't keep living like this." Her hands were shaking now, the ring she'd been holding rattling slightly against the display case. Marcus set down the scarf he'd been pretending to examine. His jaw tightened, a muscle working beneath his beard. When he spoke, his voice was so calm, it was almost terrifying. "What's his name?" "Derek. Derek Holloway. He works upstairs at Tech Zone, the electronics store." Marcus nodded slowly, processing this information. Then, in a voice that carried absolute certainty, he said, "Stay here, don't leave the store. And don't worry, this ends today." "Wait, what are you?" But Marcus was already walking toward the exit, his stride deliberate and unhurried. Sarah watched him go, her heart hammering. Part of her felt a flicker of hope, but another part felt terror. What if this makes it worse? What if Derek sees him and gets angry? What if Marcus stepped outside the boutique into the main mall corridor, pulling his phone from his leather vest? The noise of the mall surrounded him: children laughing, teenagers arguing, a store somewhere playing Christmas music even though it was only November. He ignored all of it. He pulled up his contacts and hit a familiar name. Church. 2 rings. 50? "What's up, brother?" "Church meeting. Now. Bring whoever's available." There was a pause. Marcus 50 Dalton didn't call emergency church meetings the Iron Wolves term for urgent club business unless something serious was happening. "What's going on?" "Got a girl being stalked. Works at the Westfield Mall. Stalker works here too. I need bodies." Say no more. I'll make calls. 20 minutes. Make it 15. Marcus hung up and stood for a moment in the middle of the mall corridor, his mind working. He dealt with situations like this before. Abusive boyfriends. Stalkers. Predators who thought they could terrorize someone without consequences. The law was slow. The system was broken. Restraining orders were pieces of paper that didn't stop bullets or fists or men who felt entitled to women's attention. But the Iron Wolves? They were immediate. They were real. They were the solution when the system failed. 15 minutes later, the rumble of motorcycle engines echoed through the mall's underground parking garage. One by one, they arrived. Leather vests, weathered faces, men and women who'd seen too much and survived it all. Hank Hammer, Rodriguez, 62, a Vietnam vet with shrapnel still lodged near his spine and eyes that had seen horrors most people couldn't imagine. He'd been with the club for 30 years. Tommy Ghost Chin, 35, former Army Ranger, quiet as death and twice as effective. He'd earned his road name because he could move through a room without anyone noticing until he wanted to be noticed. Joanna Joe Martinez, 48, the club's sergeant-at-arms and a woman who'd survived her own nightmare of domestic violence before the wolves helped her escape. She had a scar running from her temple to her jaw that she never hid, wearing it like a badge of honor. Marcus Drifter Blake, no relation to 5043, a former sheriff's deputy who'd left the force after watching the justice system fail one too many times. And 8 others, 12 in total, including 50. They gathered near the entrance to the parking garage, drawing stares from families loading shopping bags into minivans. Some people hurried past, clutching their children a little closer. Others stopped and watched, uncertain whether to be afraid or curious. 50 briefed them quickly, his voice low and steady. There's a girl working in a boutique on the lower level, Sarah Mitchell. 23, maybe 24. She's being stalked by a guy named Derek Holloway who works at the electronics store upstairs. He's been following her for months, texts, notes, showing up everywhere she goes. Police and security won't do anything because he hasn't technically broken any laws yet. Yet, Joe repeated, her voice hard as stone. Yet, 50 confirmed. We're going to make sure he doesn't get the chance. Hammer cracked his knuckles, a sound like gravel grinding. What's the play? We walk with her. Everywhere. Until her shift ends, we make our presence known. And if this Derek shows his face, we make it crystal clear that she's got family now. And nobody messes with family. Ghost, who rarely spoke, said simply, rules of engagement. No violence unless absolutely necessary for her protection. This isn't about us. It's about making sure she feels safe and making sure he understands there are consequences. 50 looked each of them in the eye. We're not vigilantes. We're not thugs. We're her brothers and sisters now. We do this right. They nodded, understanding flowing between them without need for more words. They'd done this before. Women fleeing abusive relationships. Kids being bullied. Veterans being harassed by creditors or dealers. The Iron Wolves had a saying, when the system fails, we don't. No questions asked. No hesitation. Just action. Inside the boutique, Sarah had been pacing nervously for the past 15 minutes. Her coworker, a 19-year-old college student named Brittany, who worked part-time, had noticed. You okay, Sarah? You seem really on edge today. I'm fine. Sarah lied automatically. Is it that creepy guy again? From the electronics store? Sarah had confided in Brittany once during a particularly bad shift when Derek had come in 3 separate times. Always watching, always lurking. Brittany had been sympathetic but ultimately helpless. Yeah. I saw him earlier. Did you tell security? What's the point? Brittany didn't have an answer for that. The door chimed. Sarah's head snapped up, her entire body tensing, expecting to see Derek smile. His styled hair, his predatory eyes instead. It was Marcus. But he wasn't alone. Behind him walked 4 more people wearing Iron Wolves vests. 2 men and 2 women, all carrying themselves with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from having survived things that would have broken weaker people. Brittany's eyes went wide. Sarah? But Sarah was staring at Marcus, confusion and hope warring on her face. Marcus approached the counter, his expression gentle despite his intimidating appearance. "Sarah, these are some of my brothers and sisters from the club. We're going to make sure you get home safe tonight. And we're going to make sure Derek understands that his attention isn't welcome anymore." One of the women, Jo, though Sarah didn't know her name, yet stepped forward. She was stunning in that dangerous way, with silver-streaked black hair, sharp cheekbones, and a scar that somehow made her more beautiful rather than less. "Hi, sweetheart," Jo said, her voice surprisingly warm. "We're not going to let anything happen to you. You're under our protection now." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She didn't know these people, didn't understand why they cared. But for the first time in 6 months, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Safe. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Marcus told her. "Just finish your shift. We'll be here." And they were. For the next 3 hours, as Sarah worked, as she helped customers and folded clothes and processed transactions, the iron wolves were present, not intrusive, not hovering, just there. Two of them browsed the store casually, occasionally asking Sarah's advice on gift ideas. Two more stood near the entrance, arms crossed, making their presence unmistakable to anyone who walked by. Another positioned himself in the mall corridor just outside, leaning against the wall like he had all the time in the world. Shoppers noticed. Of course they noticed. A group of bikers in a suburban shopping mall wasn't exactly common. Some people stared. Some whispered. Some kept their distance. But others smiled, nodded in respect. One elderly woman even stopped Jo and said, "Thank you for your service," assuming she was a veteran. Jo didn't correct her, just nodded graciously. Sarah worked her shift in a daze, part of her still waiting for this to somehow be a dream or a trick. But every time she looked up, they were still there, solid, real, protective. Brittany whispered to her during a quiet moment, "Sarah, who are these people?" "I think," Sarah said slowly, "they're angels." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Derek Holloway had been watching the boutique from his usual spot, a bench near the food court that gave him a clear view of Threads and Things entrance. He'd done this dozens of times before, settling in with a coffee and his phone, looking for all the world like just another person killing time at the mall. He knew Sarah's schedule by heart, knew she worked until closing on Saturdays, knew she'd have to walk through the parking garage alone, tired and distracted. That's when she was most vulnerable, most approachable. He didn't think of it as stalking. He thought of it as persistence, as showing interest, as being the kind of guy who didn't give up just because a girl played hard to get. Derek had always gotten what he wanted. Always. He'd been the golden boy in high school, the guy who dated cheerleaders and got athletic scholarships. He'd charmed his way through college, networked his way into management positions, smiled and nodded and maneuvered until he was always on top. Sarah was just another challenge, another thing to acquire. She'd say yes eventually. They always did. But tonight, something was different. As Sarah's shift approached its end, the boutique closed at 9 p.m. Derek stood from his bench, straightened his jacket, and started walking toward the store. He'd planned his approach. Casual, friendly, maybe comment on how tired she must be, offer to walk her to her car for safety. But as he approached the boutique, he noticed something that made him pause. Bikers, several of them, wearing matching vests, leather and denim, standing near the store entrance like sentries. Derek frowned. What the hell? He slowed his approach, trying to look casual, but his mind was racing. This didn't make sense. Why were bikers at a women's clothing store? Were they shopping? Meeting someone? Then he saw her. Sarah emerged from the boutique at closing time, her purse over her shoulder, looking tired but somehow different. Her posture was different. She wasn't hunched, wasn't darting her eyes around nervously. She was walking with the bikers, not just near them, with them, surrounded by them like they were her personal security detail. Derek's confident smile faltered. He stood rooted to the spot, confusion morphing into something uglier. Anger. Possessiveness. What the hell is this? He started toward them, his stride aggressive now, his usual charm replaced with something harder. That's when one of the bikers stepped forward, placing himself directly in Derek's path. The man was massive, easily 6'3", broad-shouldered, with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that had seen things Derek couldn't imagine. His leather vest was adorned with patches and pins, each telling a story. The name on his vest read 50. "Can I help you?" Derek asked, trying to inject authority into his voice, trying to sound like the manager he was, like someone in control. Marcus didn't smile, didn't shout, didn't threaten. He simply looked at Derek with the kind of gaze that made grown men reconsider their choices. The kind of gaze that said, "I've faced real danger, and you ain't it. You know Sarah?" Marcus's voice was low, calm, conversational, almost. Derek's face flushed. "Yeah, we're friends." "No." The word was delivered with absolute certainty. "You're not." The other bikers had stopped now, forming a loose semicircle. They didn't move, didn't speak, didn't need to. Their presence alone was louder than any threat. Derek tried to brush past, to maintain his bravado. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, but I'm the guy who's going to make sure you understand something." Marcus's voice remained perfectly calm, which somehow made it more chilling. "Sarah's not interested. She's never been interested. She's told you no. She's blocked your number. She's filed complaints. But you kept pushing. That ends tonight. I have no idea what you're Derek Holloway, 31 years old, shift manager at TechZone. You drive a leased BMW 3 Series, license plate 7TKR492. You live at the Riverside Apartments on Fulton Avenue, Unit 2B. You have a sister named Michelle in Portland and parents in Florida you haven't spoken to in 3 years. Derek's face went white. "How do you—" "I made some calls while we waited." Marcus took a single step closer. Not aggressive, just deliberate. "Here's how this works. You're going to leave Sarah alone, completely. No more texts, no more notes, no more coincidentally showing up where she is. No more watching, no more following. You see her in this mall? You turn around and walk the other direction. You understand? You can't tell me, 'Yes, I can.'" Marcus's voice dropped even lower. "Because if you go near her again, if you text her, call her, follow her, send her flowers, leave her notes, even look at her wrong, you're going to answer to all of us." He gestured to the circle of bikers surrounding them. Hammer, with his Vietnam vet stare. Ghost, who hadn't said a word but didn't need to. Joe, whose scarred face told its own story of survival and strength. "We know where you live," Marcus continued. "We know where you work. We know your routine. And we're not the police, Derek. We're not bound by their rules. We're just a group of people who really, really don't like men who terrorize women." Derek tried to muster some response, some defense, but the words died in his throat. He looked around at the faces surrounding him, men and women who'd seen real violence, survived real darkness. Men and women who weren't bluffing. "This is harassment," he finally managed, his voice cracking. Joe laughed, a sound without humor. "Says the man who's been harassing a young woman for 6 months? That's rich. You're all crazy. I'm calling security." "Go ahead," Marcus said calmly. "Tell them what? That a group of bikers told you to leave a woman alone? Pretty sure they'll agree with us." Derek stood there for a long moment, his confident facade crumbling, his control slipping. He looked at Sarah, who was standing behind the wall of bikers, her eyes wide but no longer afraid. For the first time in months, she wasn't the one who looked like prey. He was. Something in Derek's expression changed. The charm evaporated completely, replaced with undisguised anger. "You're going to regret this, Sarah. All of you." Hammer took a step forward, his voice gravelly from decades of cigarettes and hard living. "Son, I've got 62 years of regrets. Adding you to the list won't make a damn bit of difference. Now walk away while you still can." For a moment, Derek looked like he might do something stupid. His fists clenched, his jaw tightened. The air became electric with potential violence. But then he looked into Marcus's eyes again. Those calm, patient, absolutely certain eyes, and whatever bravado he had left evaporated. He turned and walked away, his footsteps quick and uneven, his shoulders hunched. He didn't look back. The iron wolves watched him until he disappeared into the crowd, swallowed by the mall's Saturday evening chaos. Sarah stood frozen, her back against the boutique's locked gate, tears streaming down her face. Her whole body was shaking, not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming relief of a pressure she'd been carrying for months finally lifting. Joe approached her gently, reaching out but not touching, giving Sarah the space to accept comfort on her own terms. "You're okay, sweetheart. He's gone. I can't." Sarah couldn't form words. 6 months of fear, of sleepless nights, of looking over her shoulder, of feeling hunted, it all came pouring out in silent tears. Joanna moved closer, and this time Sarah didn't pull away. Joe wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and Sarah collapsed into the embrace, sobbing into the shoulder of a woman she'd met 3 hours ago, but who felt safer than anyone in her life right now. "Let it out," Joe murmured. "You're safe now. We've got you." The other bikers stood in a respectful circle, giving Sarah privacy while maintaining their protective formation. Marcus caught Hammer's eye and nodded toward the parking garage entrance. Hammer understood immediately, heading in that direction to scout ahead, to make sure Derek hadn't doubled back, to ensure the path was clear. After a few minutes, Sarah's breathing steadied. She pulled back from Joe, wiping her eyes, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Don't you dare apologize," Joe said, firmly. "You've been carrying this alone for too long. You're allowed to feel whatever you need to feel." Marcus approached, his expression gentle. "Sarah, where's your car?" "Level 4 of the parking garage. West side." "Okay, we're going to walk you there. Is your sister at home?" Sarah shook her head. "I told her to stay at a friend's house tonight. I was afraid Derek might." She didn't finish the sentence. "She didn't need to." "Smart," Marcus said. "Text her. Tell her it's safe to come home. Tell her the problem is handled." "Is it?" Sarah looked up at him, hope and disbelief warring in her expression. "Is it really over?" "Yes," Marcus said with absolute certainty. "Men like Derek are cowards. They prey on people they think are alone, vulnerable, unprotected. But you're not alone anymore, and he knows it now." The walk through the mall was surreal. The 12 members of the Iron Wolves formed a protective formation around Sarah, not obvious, not dramatic, but deliberate. To anyone watching, it might have looked like a group of friends leaving together. But Sarah felt the intentionality of it, the way they positioned themselves to create a barrier between her and the world. People still stared. But now, walking with the wolves instead of alone, Sarah didn't feel exposed. She felt sheltered. They took the elevator down to the parking garage, all of them together, filling the small space with leather and denim and the faint smell of motorcycle exhaust. The elevator music was absurdly cheerful, some pop song that felt completely disconnected from the gravity of the moment. Ghost, who'd barely spoken all evening, suddenly said, "This song is terrible." It broke the tension. Sarah laughed a small, surprised sound, and suddenly everyone was smiling. "Ghost speaks," Tommy Drifter said. "Mark your calendars, people. November 16th, 2024. Historic moment." "Shut up," Ghost muttered, but there was a hint of a smile on his usually stoic face. The elevator dinged, and they stepped out into the concrete tomb of level 4. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows. The smell of exhaust and oil hung heavy in the recycled air. Hammer was already there, standing near Sarah's car, a beat-up Honda Civic that had seen better days. He gave Marcus a subtle nod. "All clear." Sarah unlocked her car with trembling hands, then turned to face the group of people who'd changed her life in a matter of hours. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't even understand why you did this. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "My sister was murdered by her boyfriend when I was 19. He'd been hurting her for a year. And nobody did anything. Nobody stepped in. Nobody protected her. And then one day, he went too far and she was gone. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. I swore after that, Marcus continued, his voice rough with old pain, that I would never stand by and watch someone be terrorized. Not ever again. You don't have to know someone to know they deserve to be safe. And you don't have to earn protection. It's a right, not a privilege. Joe stepped forward and pressed something into Sarah's hand. A card with a phone number written on it in neat handwriting. That's the clubhouse number, Joe explained. It's answered 24/7. You call if he ever comes back. Day or night, doesn't matter. One call, and we'll be there. And Sarah? She waited until Sarah met her eyes. We mean that. This isn't just talk. You're family now, and we protect family. Sarah looked down at the card, then back up at the circle of faces weathered, scarred, tattooed, but filled with more genuine compassion than she'd experienced from most respectable people in her life. I don't know what to say except thank you, she whispered. Don't need to say anything else, Hammer rumbled. Just take care of yourself. And your sister. How did you know about you? Mentioned her earlier when you were helping 50 pick out a gift, Joe said with a small smile. We listen. Sarah drove home that night in a daze, her hands still shaking slightly on the steering wheel, but her heart lighter than it had been in months. She kept glancing in her rearview mirror, half expecting to see Derek's BMW following her, like always. But there was nothing, just empty road behind her. When she got to her apartment, she texted Mia, It's safe to come home. I'll explain everything when you get here. I love you. Mia responded immediately. Oh my God. Finally. On my way. Love you too. Sarah walked into their tiny studio apartment, one room that served as bedroom, living room, and dining room all at once, with a kitchenette in the corner and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. She sat on the edge of the futon that served as their couch and pulled out the card Joe had given her. The number was written clearly, along with 3 words. You're not alone. Sarah started crying again, but this time they were different tears. Release, relief, gratitude. For 6 months, she'd felt like she was drowning, like she was screaming underwater where nobody could hear her. The system had failed her. The police had failed her. Everyone who was supposed to protect her had told her there was nothing they could do until something actually happened. But these strangers, these bikers who society often judged and feared, they hadn't waited for something to happen. They'd stepped in before it got worse. They'd seen someone in need and acted without hesitation. When Mia got home 20 minutes later, Sarah told her everything. About Derek, about the months of fear she'd been hiding, about the biker who'd walked into her store and changed everything. Mia listened with wide eyes, then hugged her sister so tightly Sarah could barely breathe. Why didn't you tell me? Mia whispered. Why did you go through this alone? Because I didn't want you to be scared too. I wanted to protect you. Sarah, you can't protect me by drowning yourself. We're supposed to protect each other. They held each other for a long time in that tiny apartment. 2 sisters who'd lost so much but still had each other. The next morning, Sarah woke up, and for the first time in 6 months, she didn't immediately feel dread. She checked her phone. No messages from Derek. No missed calls from unknown numbers. Nothing. She went to work that afternoon, a Sunday shift at the boutique, half expecting Derek to show up like always. But he didn't. Her lunch break came and went. Her shift ended. Still nothing. She asked Brittany, her coworker, Have you seen that guy from TechZone? Derek? Brittany shook her head. No. Actually, now that you mention it, I haven't seen him around all week. Why? No reason, Sarah said, allowing herself a small smile. Just curious. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's life slowly began to resemble something normal again. The constant state of alert started to fade. She slept through the night for the first time in months. Her appetite returned. She even laughed at a customer's joke. She heard through the mall gossip network that Derek had requested a transfer to another TechZone location. Leaving at the end of the month, someone said. Guess he got a better offer in Stockton. Sarah knew better. He hadn't gotten a better offer. He'd been given a choice: leave or face the Iron Wolves again. And Derek, for all his charm and persistence, was ultimately a coward. One Saturday morning, about 3 weeks after the incident, Sarah was opening the boutique when she heard the familiar rumble of motorcycle engines. Her heart jumped not with fear this time, but with something else. Hope? Gratitude? She looked toward the mall entrance and saw them. The Iron Wolves, riding through the parking lot in formation. Not stopping, not making a scene, just passing through on their way to somewhere else. But as they passed, Marcus caught her eye through the window and nodded. Just once. A simple acknowledgement. We're still here. We're still watching. You're still protected. Sarah waved back, her eyes suddenly wet with tears she hadn't expected. A month after the night that changed everything, Sarah was working a quiet Tuesday afternoon shift when the door chimed. She looked up, customer service smile ready, and froze. It was Marcus. But this time, he wasn't alone. He was with a woman tall, athletic, with short platinum blonde hair and a leather jacket that matched his. She had an easy confidence about her, the kind that came from being completely comfortable in her own skin. Sarah. Marcus's gruff voice held actual warmth. Good to see you. This is Jackie. It's her birthday, and apparently I did a terrible job shopping last time because I never actually bought anything. Sarah laughed, a real, genuine laugh. Well, let's fix that. Hi, Jackie. I'm Sarah. Jackie shook her hand warmly. I've heard a lot about you. 50 says you're the one who finally taught him what good taste looks like. I don't know about that, but I did my best. They spent the next 30 minutes browsing, with Sarah helping Jackie pick out a few items. It was easy, comfortable, like shopping with friends instead of customers. As they were checking out, Jackie leaned in and said quietly, "Thank you for helping 50 see that he can do thoughtful gifts. He bought me motorcycle parts for my birthday last year." Sarah smiled. I actually think that's kind of sweet. It is. But so is this. Jackie held up the scarf with the skull pattern that Sarah had originally shown Marcus. As Marcus paid, and this time, he actually completed the transaction, Sarah noticed something tucked into his vest pocket. A familiar edge of worn fabric. Is that? Marcus pulled it out slightly. A teddy bear's ear. Small, worn. Sarah's eyes widened with recognition. She'd seen that before in a story someone had shared on social media. The little girl, she whispered. Lily, the Father's Day story. Marcus looked surprised. You know about that? Everyone knows about that. That photo went viral. The little girl and the bikers. It was beautiful. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, clearly not used to talking about it. She gave it to me. Said it protects people. Seemed wrong not to keep it close. In that moment, Sarah understood something profound. These men and women, these Iron Wolves, they weren't doing this for recognition or praise. They were doing it because it was right, because people needed protecting, because someone had to stand between the vulnerable and the vultures. You're good people, Sarah said simply. We're just people, Marcus replied, trying to do better than we did yesterday. 2 months after the encounter at the mall, Sarah's life had transformed in ways she never expected. Derek never came back. According to the tech's own employees Sarah occasionally chatted with, he'd transferred to Stockton and hadn't been seen since. Some rumors said he'd quit entirely, moved out of state. Sarah didn't know and didn't care. He was gone. That was enough. But the Iron Wolves hadn't disappeared from her life. Once a month, like clockwork, a few of them would stop by the boutique. Sometimes it was Marcus and Jackie, shopping for something or just saying hello. Sometimes it was Joe, who'd struck up an unexpected friendship with Sarah over their shared love of old movies and strong coffee. Sometimes it was Hammer, who never bought anything but would sit on the bench outside the store and keep watch during Sarah's closing shifts, making sure she never had to walk to her car alone. They'd become family, not by blood, but by choice. Sarah had even visited the clubhouse once, nervous and out of place, only to be welcomed with warmth and genuine affection. They'd shown her the charity work they did organizing toy drives for underprivileged kids. raising money for veteran support organizations, escorting abuse victims to safe houses. This is what we do, Joe had explained. This is who we are. The world sees the leather and the ink and thinks we're dangerous. And maybe we are. But we're dangerous to the right people. To the predators. To the bullies. To the ones who hurt the vulnerable. Sarah had started therapy, using some of the money she'd saved by not having to constantly look over her shoulder, not having to take taxis instead of buses because she was afraid of being followed. The therapist was helping her process the trauma, helping her understand that what happened wasn't her fault, that she wasn't weak for being afraid. Mia was thriving too. Her grades had improved, and she'd been accepted to UC Davis with a partial scholarship. Sarah had cried when they got the acceptance letter, tears of joy and pride and relief that her sister's dreams were still possible. One Saturday evening, as Sarah was closing the boutique, she found an envelope taped to the door. For a moment, her old fear spiked Derek, but then she recognized the handwriting. Inside was a note on Iron Wolf's MC letterhead. "Stay strong, Sarah. The world needs people like you who don't give up, who keep going even when it's hard. You're tougher than you know." The wolves beneath it was a small silver pin, a wolf's head, howling at the moon. The Iron Wolf symbol. Sarah clutched it to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness or fear this time. Tears of belonging, of being seen, of being valued. She wore that pin every day after that, clipped to her work shirt where everyone could see it. And every time someone asked about it, customers, co-workers, strangers, she told them the story. Not the dramatic version, not the Hollywood version, but the truth. I was being stalked. I was terrified. The system couldn't help me. And then a group of bikers walked into my life and reminded me that I wasn't alone. They protected me when no one else could. They gave me my life back. Some people looked skeptical. Some people nodded knowingly. Some people shared their own stories of times when unexpected help arrived from unexpected places. But everyone who heard Sarah's story walked away thinking a little differently about the rough-looking people in leather vests. 6 months after the night at the mall, Sarah was invited to the Iron Wolves' annual charity ride, a 100-mile journey through the Sacramento Valley, raising money for a women's shelter that helped domestic violence survivors. She showed up at the clubhouse early that morning, nervous and excited. Mia came with her, wide-eyed and in awe of the dozens of motorcycles lined up, their chrome gleaming in the morning sun. Marcus walked over, grinning. "You ready to ride?" "I've never been on a motorcycle before," Sarah admitted. "Then today's the day. Joe's going to take you. She's the best rider we've got. Don't tell anyone I said that." Joe appeared, helmet in hand, smiling. "You trust me?" Sarah looked at the woman who'd become her friend, her confidant, her unexpected guardian. "With my life." The ride was transcendent. The wind in her face, the rumble of the engine beneath her, the open road stretching endlessly ahead. For the first time in as long as Sarah could remember, she felt free, truly, completely free. They rode through small towns and open countryside, past farms and forests, the fall colors blazing around them. At every stop, people came out to wave, to cheer, to donate to the cause. At the halfway point, they stopped at a roadside diner for lunch. Sarah sat surrounded by Iron Wolves, laughing at their stories, feeling more at home than she had anywhere in years. Hammer raised his coffee cup. "To Sarah, who reminds us why we do this." The others raised their cups in agreement. "To Sarah." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you. For everything. For seeing me when I felt invisible. For protecting me when I couldn't protect myself. For showing me that family isn't just about blood." "Damn right it's not," Joe said, squeezing her shoulder. "You're one of us now. You were the wolf, your family forever." That night, as Sarah lay in bed in her tiny apartment, the apartment that finally felt safe again, she thought about how much her life had changed. How 6 months ago, she'd been drowning, trapped, terrified. How one moment, one conversation with a stranger in a clothing boutique had changed everything. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to the Iron Wolves group chat, they'd added her to. Thank you for giving me my life back. I'll never be able to repay you. Responses came immediately. Marcus, you already have. You kept going. That's enough. Joe, you're our sister now. No repayment needed. Hammer, just pay it forward, kid. Help someone else when you can. Sarah smiled, wiping away tears. Pay it forward. Yes, she could do that. 1 year after the night that changed her life, Sarah stood in front of her community, college's administration building, holding an acceptance letter. She'd been accepted into their social work program. For months, she'd been thinking about what she wanted to do with her life. Retail wasn't forever. She wanted something that mattered, something that helped people the way she'd been helped. When she told the Iron Wolves, they'd insisted on celebrating. The whole club had shown up at a local diner, ordering too much food and laughing too loud and making Sarah feel like the most important person in the world. You're going to be amazing, Joe had told her. You've lived through what a lot of your future clients will be living through. That empathy, that understanding that's going to make you incredible at this. Marcus had simply nodded, pride evident in his eyes. Your mother would be proud. Sarah had started crying then, because he was right. Her mother would have been so proud. Sarah never forgot what happened that November night at the mall. How could she? It was the night she learned that safety could come from unexpected places. That strength didn't always look like what you expected. That the scariest-looking people could have the gentlest hearts. She never saw Derek again. Through the grapevine, she heard he'd moved to Arizona, started fresh somewhere else. Part of her hoped he'd learned something. Most of her just hoped he stayed far away. The wolf pin never left her shirt. Even when she started her social work internship years later, even when she graduated with her degree, even when she got her first job at a women's shelter, helping survivors of domestic violence, the pin was always there. And when clients asked about it, she told them the truth. I was being hunted. I was terrified. The system failed me. And then a group of strangers in leather vests reminded me that I wasn't alone. They protected me. They saved me. And they taught me that the world is full of angels, they just don't always look like what we expect. 10 years later, Sarah would stand at a podium at a conference on domestic violence prevention, sharing her story with a room full of social workers, police officers, and advocates. She'd talk about the failures of the system, about the gaps in protection, about how restraining orders are just paper, and how fear doesn't wait for warrants. And then she'd talk about the Iron Wolves, about how a community stepped in when institutions failed, about how protection came from brotherhood, from loyalty, from people who'd seen darkness and decided to be light for someone else. In the audience that day would be Marcus 50 Dalton, now in his 50s, his beard more silver than black, but his eyes still sharp. Beside him would be Joe, and Hammer, and Ghost, and all the others who'd been there that night. When Sarah finished speaking, the room would erupt in applause. But she'd be looking at them, at her family, at the people who'd given her the courage to turn her trauma into purpose. After the talk, Marcus would approach her, proud and gruff as always. You did good, kid. I learned from the best. People who walk through that mall every day have no idea what happened there on that November evening. They don't know about the girl who was drowning or the bikers who pulled her to shore. They don't know that sometimes justice doesn't come from courts and police stations. Sometimes it comes from leather vests and motorcycle engines. Sometimes it comes from people society fears, choosing to protect someone society forgot. Sarah Mitchell isn't a victim anymore. She's a survivor, an advocate, a social worker who helps other survivors find their strength. And she does it wearing a small silver pin on her shirt, a wolf howling at the moon. Because she learned something that night that changed her forever. You don't have to be alone in your fear. You don't have to wait for the system to save you. Sometimes, family finds you in the most unexpected places. Sometimes, angels wear leather. And sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to look at someone else's suffering and say, "Not on my watch, Marcus." 50 Dalton never considered himself a hero. He'd tell you he was just a guy who rode bikes, worked on engines, and tried to live by a code, loyalty, honor. Protect those who can't protect themselves. But to Sarah Mitchell, he was an angel. And maybe that's what angels really are, not perfect beings with halos and wings descending from clouds, but flawed, scarred, tattooed humans who choose kindness when cruelty would be easier, who choose protection when walking away would be simpler, who choose to see someone else's pain and do something about it. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that compassion can come from the most unexpected places, that strength doesn't always roar, but sometimes whispers, you're not alone, that the people society fears most are often the ones who protect it when no one else will, then please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below telling us about a time when an unexpected stranger helped you, or when you were that stranger for someone else. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories that restore faith in humanity, that remind us that goodness exists in places we don't always think to look. And before this story ends, answer this question in the comments. If you could thank one person who made you feel safe when you were afraid, who would it be? Share their story. Honor them, because somewhere tonight, another Sarah is closing up shop, glancing nervously toward the door, waiting for someone to say, "You're not alone anymore." And maybe, just maybe, 50 bikers are already on their way. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.